Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024. Our goal here is to review the market generated information in a holistic fashion. We're intimately following the auctions narrative for both ES and NQ. If we have time, we'll theorize and add additional commentary towards the end. We did upload a video today of our live commentary and some of our prep. Check it out if you like. All right, perfect. So, we'll start off with our summary questions. Where's the market coming from, and what is price trying to accomplish? We'll look at the S&P 500. Again, this is Tuesday. We're starting our week off with Monday being a lower high and a lower low, and another lower high and lower low day for the S&P 500. Ideally, they wanted to push and make a new high and at least contest for the all-time high, but it just didn't happen today. So really, their goal was to make another higher high and ideally a higher low. Didn't do it. Same case for the Nasdaq, but funny enough, they did. They got their higher high and their higher low. Um, so kind of curious. Again, we've been seeing like a small trend up for the NQ. I would imagine this may be staircase up, elevator down, if they do start breaking some of these lows with the upcoming earnings. But something to be interested in. But bulls have control on the highest time frame, on the intermediate, and then even on the momentum for the daily. At worst, this may just be balance, what it seems like. I wouldn't give any kind of relevance to the sellers yet, though they did step out of the woodworks today. So again, it was fairly light on the docket today. No data, just a Fed speaker, Harker, and we had some lightish earnings. Again, this is why industrials were down for so much. As far as the GE Aerospace, they're the top weighted for the industrials. Then we have some of communications, and I forget what GM is and 3M. But these play somewhat of a factor. But the biggest ones are going to be for Tesla and Boeing, AT&T, Coca-Cola. Definitely Wednesday. I think QuantumScape, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, definitely Wednesday and Thursday as well. So we definitely want to keep an eye on that. No real big political headlines to be aware of. There's definitely still some geopolitical tensions, but not really too much that's glaring. Looking at the NQ, who got the higher high and the higher low, we can see that the volume is still slightly increasing, about average, maybe a little, yeah, about average. So we're seeing just a little more activity in the Nasdaq than the S&P 500. The sellers got down to a negative 3,600, but we closed positive for our delta. Sellers are really pushing hard to start the session, and buyers just completely stuffed it, and they completely stuffed it. And yeah, the sellers are off balance now. So all these sellers here, they were just really pressing. They will be offsides if anything. Price closed above them. 242 points of range and about 43 points of range for the S&P 500. Again, same sellers, boom, 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 boom. But we can see that the price closed near the top quarter, with the VPOC being at the midpoint, where the VPOC for the NASDAQ was above the halfway point. So again, even a lot of sellers here as well, but the sellers definitely finished pretty strong, but no real price to show for it. The majority of these sellers were really to start the session. Buyers had to push a lot of effort to push this back up, but I don't know. This is kind of a strange place to end, so I'm not really sure what to make of that. But it's still lower high and lower low, so good job, sellers. Sector tracker, we finish about unchanged for the most part. Technology, negative 10 basis points. Index finished about negative 5 basis points. Really, nothing really that sticks out too much besides the industrials. Finance and healthcare, just mild damage today. This is definitely more of a defensive day with communications and staples. Hell, even energy, with crude oil being up like 2%. Other than that, this was just like a chill day for everyone, so not too much to talk about there. We'll look at the market profile for the Nasdaq, who has been doing a slightly good job. So we have our current session here, and then we have the previous session, and then the monthly candle. So there were some singles that was created in the overnight session when we drifted lower, but again, the market took that out and it closed above it. So really not too much to show there. Again, this was just like more of a normal distribution day, jagged here and jagged there for the most part. V pockets in the middle. So essentially just a normal profile shape. Looking like a bell curve. So this is normal and this is expected. It appears that we are balancing above the 2400 area, which is uber important, especially if they can stay above the 300. This is excellent for buyers. They're balancing, they're keeping prices higher. People are willing to pay higher prices above the 20K 300. So excellent job. For the S&P 500, again, they are at all-time highs. They too had singles on their overnight sell-off. Wouldn't say sell-off, but the overnight drift, 30, 40 points. They ended up pushing a bit higher and closing above that midpoint. Day two, not necessarily normal, but just a multi-distributed day. Heavy node up there and heavy node towards that lower half. Really not too much to show there. We'll put that together, and this is against last week. It makes sense that we closed near the VPOC of the week, and this is the high volume node from the prior week as well. So we're just balancing as well. So we may not be directly at all-time highs, but we are extremely close to it. So this week, prior week, and then the monthly candle, we're not getting anywhere close to this 5840s where we have some singles. So this is essentially their line in the sand before they start having more of a heavier pullback. 138-minute candle for the NQ. Higher high, higher low. Not too much to look at. We're just kind of balancing between this area here. So again, we shot down for that long impulse candle, push through. We have our low, and then we have our highs, and then we're just kind of just trading somewhere in here. Really nothing too special. Essentially the same thing for the ES, except they pierced through there, so they tried to break out of the balance and ended up pulling back. So now we're just kind of just two-way trading. It still is within that balance. A little below, a little above, but we're still in the balance just all together. S&P 500. I don't know if this is considered a trend day. I guess higher lows, higher lows, higher lows, higher lows, higher lows. Buyers had to put a lot of effort in to get the sellers off of them. So I'm really not sure what to make about this, but a horrible position for sellers. They really tried and they got no reward for it. You can see the minimum delta here was 2400, so they tried. They tried here as well, and then they got engulfed. And then just had to settle. Though all the buying here near the end of the day, and even here as well, they only got 20 points. They only got 20 points for this candle and 14 for here for all that buying. So not really too much gain from the buyers, if you will. Looking at the NASDAQ, essentially we just bear flag for 2.5 hours, broke out, and then just consolidated a little more. So really nothing too special. Again, buyers were a lot more aggressive for the NQ. Sellers attempted in that third and that fifth bar. But yeah, the buyers were just too aggressive today. They couldn't keep price lower. But also the buyers really didn't get too much progress with 240 range for NQ and 40 for the ES. Pretty simple. All right, let's look at the intraday. All right, so we'll look at let's actually look at these both because you need a little bit of context. So again, we have our overnight high here, which went all the way over there. Overnight high here, which went all the way here, right? Okay, cool. So we have our Sunday night session, then our Monday went up, shot down. Again, it's S&P 500. So as we had our overnight open, We drifted lower. We drifted lower rather, and had that overnight sell-off like we mentioned, and we pulled back into that range just about the last quarter of that range, and that's where we had our open overnight session. Again, we are much lower than prior days DGPs, and we're extremely close to the low of the prior for the prior day, and we did break that low just by a little bit and push back up in the overnight session right before the RTH. Same thing for the NQ, except their sell-off wasn't as bad. They opened near their prior IB low compared to the S&P 500. So you can see the structural weakness and the difference. Their overnight low did not break the prior day's low a day. So we're already looking at the NQ in a different light because they're back into the prior day's range to start their session and breaking through the low, mid, and the initial balance high pretty early within the first two brackets. They ended up pulling back to these VWAPs. Couldn't really hold it for too long. Had to test this midpoint. Finally pushed through this long-standing RTH high of day. Broke through the overnight high. Pulled back to the overnight high. Broke down just a little bit and just kind of balanced near there to close the day. That same pullback to the VWAP bands and then the mid was the same pullback to the open for the ES, and then back to their VWAPs for later in the day. So there was a clear switch from here around 9:30 where tech was much weaker. They had to take a break. And the S&P 500, you can see money went from technology back into some of these other markets because that energy went to the S&P 500 and they kind of firmed up above the prior days, they firmed up above the initial balance high and it really started squeezing up a little higher. And then at that point, you had ES and NQ working together, and that's how we had that final push to end the day. So if we wanted to break that into just the RTH, let's actually do it this way. Sorry, I'm still working on the best way to show this. So again, we opened lower, and you can see the S&P 500 just pushed up really tight range, impulse through, pull back. Where did they pull back? They pulled back to the open, which is also near this midpoint of all this consolidation range that's kind of happening there. So this makes sense in this pullback. This would be pullback trade one. Definitely as they coiled, broke through, pushed back, and found some decent support. And at the same time as that's happening, we're seeing the NASDAQ test their VPOCs, their VWAPs as well. And again, just going back, when they end up having that leg lower, their next level test was with this IB mid. And then that was around the same time as these VWAP tests for the S&P 500. Just for another look at that. Okay. I think it's important to mention how the NQ traded once they got to the overnight high. Complete leg through and then swift rejection back. But they still stayed somewhere around this area. The S&P 500 had to take their whole session just to get to that point, and once they did, completely rejected. Push back up, one more attempt, completely rejected, and then we finished lower. So interesting. So from a quick glance, it looks like the buyers did really well, but in the grand scheme of things, we still close under the prior day's DGPs. So really not too much progress was had. That is not the case for the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ, though they closed back into the range of the prior days, a lot more was accomplished here. So again, this is another day where the buyers had a better performance for the NQ than they did for the for the S&P 500. So I think that's about it there. How good of a job did price or buyers do? I think I will give the NASDAQ maybe like a 7 or 8, giving the overnight drift that we had. For them to be able to deal with this sell-off into RTH and then completely reverse it, pull back and burst through, definitely a strong sign for for the for the NQ. You don't really feel that from the S&P 500. We'll double check. Same drift lower. Remember, we did break that prior day's low, and we did push through the overnight high. But we kind of came back, and this just feels a lot more weaker than what it should compared to the compared to the compared to the Nasdaq. Again, this is about where we're at. So say what you will about that. But okay, I think we'll go ahead and stop there. Again, we'll give the Nasdaq maybe like a 7 or an 8. S&P 500 maybe like a 5 or a 6. That was a solid job for them to be able to break that overnight high. Definitely a short squeeze for sure. I'm interested with this delta that we're seeing, how heavy they came out the gate. We did take a trade on that yesterday when we did started our review. We noticed that this was like already almost negative 20K for the sellers, so they were definitely gearing up to start selling pretty early, and they actually did it. They actually did it. They pushed it lower. They broke that low, but there was no continuation to the downside. So right now we're still in balance. So yeah, we'll go ahead and leave it there. Again, we do have some earnings tomorrow, so be sure to stay on top of that. But other than that, have a good night. Catch y'all tomorrow.